You can't really know where you're going unless you know where you've been. The sentiment applies to all of us at the personal level. It also applies to us collectively in our local communities, city, state, nation, and globally. Genealogy is the study and practice of tracing a line of descent. Families have lines of descent, obviously. So do ideas, political systems, languages, cultures, and so on. Juneteenth may put you in a frame of mind to reflect on some of these things. Whether you're interested in exploring your own lineage, the conditions of the world in which your family lived, their ideas and insights into their life circumstances, and the broader events, political, military, legal, etc., that shaped their world, we have loads of resources in the library to help shed light on these matters. Family history can be pursued independently of broader history, but there are good reasons not to focus too narrowly. For one, family history is simply more interesting when set in historical context. It is also far more comprehensible. You won't really be able to understand your ancestors' lives without having some understanding of their world. To that end, we'd like to walk you through some sources we have at the library. So let's say we wanted to get some insight into sentiments floating around Guilford County regarding the Emancipation Proclamation of September 1862, or sentiments about the Civil War in general, or slavery as an institution, or Reconstruction. We no longer have direct access to people who were alive at the time, but we have indirect access to them through published journals, oral histories, and newspapers. And for example, search Greensboro newspapers around the dates of any historical event of the 19th century to see what was happening locally. With enough time, we could follow the progress of almost the entire Civil War and its aftermath. Much of family history involves delving into local records in which ancestors might have appeared. We use such records to construct an outline of the events of their lives, when and where they lived, maybe a bit of what they did, who they were related to, whether by blood, marriage, contract, or otherwise. The heavy lifting of this research is often done by county-level records, such as wills and estates, marriage bonds and licenses, land and property deeds, as well as church records, inscriptions of headstones, obituaries in newspapers, and myriad other sources. These can all be pieced together to form a picture of a life with varying degrees of clarity.
African-American genealogy research carries its own unique challenges, specifically finding ancestors in the U.S. Census. Typically, researchers are first able to locate ancestors by name in the 1870 census. Prior to that, enslaved individuals are only listed as tally marks to denote the number of slaves on a plantation. Genealogy researchers may be excited to find that there is an enumerated census called the slave schedules. However, navigating them can be a challenge due to their limitations.
The slave schedules were used in conjunction with the U.S. federal census in 1850 and in 1860. And they were unique because it was just a way to determine properties owned by the slave owners. And as we know, slaves were not people, they were considered property. So the slave schedules, they can be used to find your enslaved ancestors. It may be a little bit difficult to do that because, as I'll mention later, there are some disadvantages to the slave schedules, but we'll talk about that a little further in the next few moments. I believe that the slave schedules is one of the most overlooked resources for research because some people look at the limitations and think they're just not useful at all, but I disagree. As mentioned, there are some pros and cons to the slave schedules. For example, for the pros, you can discover slave owners by name in a particular location that you may be researching. Like if you were looking for slave owners in specific counties, cities, or states, you can do that with the slave schedules. Also, you can find out the number of slaves that were owned by these slave owners, and the slaves were enumerated separately, one line at a time. The biggest con to the slave schedules, of course, is the fact that there are no slave names listed. Again, there are no slave names listed. And because of that, if you're not familiar with, how to navigate the slave schedules, they can be a little difficult. to use. But hopefully after today, you'll get some tips and tricks to learn how to navigate these slave schedules a little bit better so you can further your genealogical research.
Now, I know you may be wondering, how will I be able to find my ancestors using the slave schedules if there aren't any names listed? And the simple answer is you just have to be creative and think outside of the box. Throughout my journey of researching my enslaved ancestors, I did pick up on some tips and tricks that I like to share with people to help them navigate the census and the slave schedules to find their enslaved ancestors. So in this process, I'm going to show you how to access the Ancestry database from home using your Greensboro Public Library card. And then from there, I will show you how to search the 1850 and the 1860 slave schedules. And I'll point out some things to look for to help you with your genealogical research journey to hopefully find some more information regarding your enslaved ancestors.
To access the 1850 and the 1860 slave schedules, you first need to go to the Ancestry database through the Greensboro Public Library webpage. So on the home screen here, you want to hover over where it says Research. Then under the genealogy column, you want to click on Genealogy Databases. This is what that page looks like, and you will see you can click on the Ancestry Library Edition. Now, you will need to have your library card number handy because that will be the only way you can access the database. You will need to enter your library card number here. Once you enter your library card, you will see the home page for the Ancestry Library Edition. So if you want to specifically search the 1850 and 1860 slave schedules, all you need to do is click on the search tab here. And then you want to go down to where it says Census and Voter List. Okay, so here's the home page for the Census and Voter List page. Over here on the right-hand side, under Narrow by Category, let's click on U.S. Federal Census Collection. Okay, now on this screen, you will need to scroll down to the bottom, keep scrolling, and then you will see the included data collections. And this is how you will search the individual 1850 or the 1860 slave schedule. So first you'll see here, you'll see the U.S. Federal Census slave schedules for 1850, and then you will see the U.S. Federal Census for the 1860 slave schedule. So I started with my great-great-grandparents, Wilson Pritchett and Phyllis Inge Pritchett. I know based off other census data, such as 1870 and 1880 census, I know they were both born roughly around 1835 in Pittsylvania County, Virginia. So I started with that information. All right, so when searching the slave schedules, I wanted to start off with my great-great-grandmother, Phyllis Inge Pritchett. Of course, like I mentioned before, you need to use those detective skills. So if she was born around 1835, by the time 1860 came along, she would have been roughly 25 years old. So I first went to the 1860 slave schedule and I just did a search. For the surname, I put in Inge, which was my great-great-grandmother's maiden name. Could have been used, she could have used a different last name in 1860, but I just went with Inge since that's what I knew. So I just did a search for every slave owner with the last name Inge, and I looked through the results to see if anyone had a slave who was roughly 25 years old and female. And luckily, in my case, there was only one. And so, as you can see here, there was Harriet E. Inge. Harriet, right here, is the slave owner. So from this line on, this lists all of her slaves that she had. So I looked down the list Once again, there aren't any slave names listed, but it does give you their age, sex, and race. So I did see she had a female slave, that's what the F stands for, 26 years old, Black. And she also had a female slave who was 24 years old, also Black. So I knew there was a good possibility that one of these two could have been my great-great-grandmother, Phyllis Inge. So you may be wondering, what does that tell you? So, of course, to get more information, you need to start researching the slave owner. So I went to Ancestry, did some research, and started looking into Harriet E. Inge. And then from there, I found that she was married to John M. Inge. And so doing research for him, I was able to find John M. Inge's will. And the cool thing about wills dated in that time period, a lot of times they did list their slaves by name. So I was reading through Mr. John M. Inge's will, and I did see my great-great-grandmother's name listed, Phyllis. So that was how I was able to locate my great-great-grandmother, Phyllis Inge, on the plantation of John M. Inge. Next, I wanted to do the same thing for my great-great-grandfather, Wilson Pritchett. And so I used the same strategy. I knew he was born roughly around 1835. So by 1860, he would have been around 25 years old. So I did the same thing. I went to the slave schedule. I went to the 1860 first. Typed in the last name Pritchett because I just wanted to see all Pritchett slave owners. And then I wanted to look through and see if any of them had a male slave around the age of 25 years old. And this is the result I found. Like I said, lucky it was for me, it was only one person to match. As you can see, the slave owner is Sarah Pritchett, and here are her slaves here. And I did see that she has a 26-year-old male Black slave. And again, there was a possibility that this could be my great-great-grandfather, Wilson Pritchett. So I did, just like I did before, I started researching Sarah Pritchett. In researching Sarah Pritchett, I did find that she was married to a man named Major John M. Pritchett. And doing more research, I went to the courthouse. I was able to locate a slave inventory of John Pritchett dated 1849. And interesting enough, it did list his slaves by name and their age. And as you can see, I did find Wilson Pritchett, my great-great-grandfather, when he was 16 years old. So you can, as you can see, you can use the slave schedules to find more information regarding your enslaved ancestors.
All around us is the North Carolina Collection, a special local history collection of about 12,000 items up on the second floor of the Central Library. It covers topics from local and state history to education, religion, genealogy, art, architecture, poetry, local authors, you name it. Any historical, or really any topic that libraries collect that pertains to Guilford County, local area, and to North Carolina in general, that's what the NC collection is for. As with any good-sized genealogy collection in a public library in the United States, we have a large collection. Here it's about 4,000 or 5,000 items probably that are abstracts and indexes of different kinds of genealogical records. This covers the gambit, everything from marriage records, land deeds, wills, estates, cemeteries, you name it. So this whole section is arranged alphabetically by state, and within states, alphabetically by counties. And if you were to come to the library doing genealogical research, or traveling to another state or another county to do genealogical research there, you would likely spend a lot of time amid these kind of books that essentially provide access to historical records that are otherwise very difficult to get to, because these are all cases where an author has gone to the original, very often a handwritten original document, read over it, digested it mentally, typed up the parts that are significant to a researcher, and slapped it together in book form, because otherwise a lot of this stuff is just pieces of papers in boxes in basements somewhere, and we would have no idea that they even exist, let alone know what was in them, unless authors, very often at a very local level, put all this stuff together for us. So these 6 shelves are all genealogical material specific to Guilford County, not historical material, not digested, analyzed historical write-ups, but abstracts and indexes of records pertaining specifically to Guilford. Within any given county, there's another set of sub-organization that covers the whole range of genealogical material, but here, essentially, we go from miscellaneous indexes, census abstracts, various kinds of court minutes, marriage records. All of this are cemeteries in Guilford County. Wills and estates, a little bit of land records, a lot more land records, and then a variety of things that are military and church related.
Whether they're physical or digital, the Greensboro Public Library has the genealogy resources to help you discover your family's past. This Juneteenth, we hope you celebrate the past and the future, and consider checking out some of the wonderful collections available with your Greensboro Public Library card. If you'd like more information on our collections, or would like to learn more about how to use these genealogy resources, you can visit us in person, or where the GPL is always open, online at greensborolibrary.org.